good. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a modified gumbo recipe. And the point of today's presentation is not to come up here and say, look at how I make gumbo, my way is the best, do it my way. It's not like that at all. The point of this presentation is that I can show you sort of a model that you can take home and modify your own recipes so that you can take something that maybe you grew up eating, your grandma's favorite recipe that you know is unhealthy for you now. You can take it and modify it so that it's something that you and your family can enjoy regularly and have it be a healthy thing for you. So without further ado, let's take a look at a normal gumbo recipe, and this is one I took from Emeril Lagasse. You know, there's many different ways to make gumbo, maybe thousands I've read. So with Emeril's recipe, he uses a cup of butter, and so I'm sure you can tell me right now that's way too much fat. 1 cup of butter is too much. 2 quarts of shrimp and seafood stock, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. And stock is essential to any gumbo, but your average stock is going to have too much salt in it, and there's a way to get around that. He uses a pound of andouille sausage, and there's some problems with andouille sausage, but there's ways that you can use a healthier type of andouille or a different type of sausage. Cooked white rice, this is another thing that we're going to be looking at and modifying. So here's where the first step comes from. So your first step in modifying a recipe is do whatever you can to forget the fat. Now, I've talked a lot about how it's not necessarily the amount of fat in your diet, but it's the type of fat. But the amount of fat does also count. The type of fat is very important for your cardiovascular health, and you still want to be trying to get those unsaturated fats. Those are good for you. But as far as weight loss is concerned, eating as little fat as possible is good, because fat is a very calorie-dense food. So 1 cup of butter is equal to 184 grams of fat, 117 grams of saturated fat, that's the bad fat, 488 milligrams of cholesterol, and 1,307 milligrams of sodium. And all those numbers are just way too much. And you'd have similar stats for vegetable oils. You could use canola oil or a healthy oil, but the problem is it's still going to be a lot of calories. So you want to do what you can to cut out the fat. So what you can do is you can make a roux without the oil. And I'm going to show you that right now. So this is a pretty easy process. The only thing that comes into play is it's a little bit easier to burn, but just like when you normally make a roux with oil, you just throw your flour in the pan, in a hot pan, and you brown it for a while until it comes out to about this color. Or maybe if you like a darker roux, maybe a more chocolate colored roux, you could brown it to a darker color. And you know, that gets a little more dangerous, a more advanced cooking technique because you're more liable to burn it. But if you're able to do it, I'm sure you can do it with this method as well. And this is something you can do in any sort of recipe that calls for a roux, not just gumbo. You can do it with etouffee. You can do it with any sort of sauce that calls on a roux as its base. You can use that brown flour, and you will be surprised. You still get a great flavor out of it.
Sure.
Real hot. You turn it up to like all the way on hot, and you wait till you can tell the pan's pretty hot. If you put a little bit of water on it, it'll sizzle right off it. So just like when you're normally making a roux, it's important that the pan's really hot. Mm-hmm. No, I'm using no oil whatsoever. Just the flour on the hot pan, and this was an actual picture of when I did it. The flour will turn out to be just like this. And I actually use my nose to tell when it's done because you can smell that toasty flavor. You have a question?
How long does it take for it to go from that?
I mean, it depends. Probably about 3 to 5 minutes maybe, depending on how hot your pan is. And it's also key to use a good pan that will get hot like a cast iron skillet. So. And these are techniques that I want you to try to experiment with, even if you're not necessarily comfortable with it at first. Go ahead.
Is that just regular flour?
It's just regular white flour. Here's another way to forget the fat. So in my recipe, I use turkey thighs, And to cut out on the fat that's inherent in those turkey thighs, I remove the skin. And this is a simple thing you can do with just about any recipe that calls for chicken or any meat that has skin on it. Is just take the skin off. You can buy skinless in the store, as you know, but it's cheaper if you remove the skin yourself because you're not paying someone to take off the skin. The more money in your pocket, the more money you have to spend on fresh vegetables. So take off the skin, another way to decrease the fat in your food. And here's another thing you can do is use a healthier andouille, because regular pork andouille, as with any pork product, has way too much saturated fat. And a lot of other pork products, andouille included, also have a lot of salt. So there's some really great smoked turkey sausages out there. There's even some turkey andouilles that I would challenge you to test head-to-head with a pork andouille and tell me which one's better. And those turkey sausages invariably have less fat, and they probably have around the same amount of salt. There's nothing you can really do about salt in sausage, and a lot of these recipes call for sausage, and as long as you're not adding extra salt, you'll probably be okay. Here's some brands of just regular old smoked turkey sausage, which makes a great substitute in itself. And the Savoy's brand right here, which you can find at Bromart and I believe Rouse's. That's a great one right there if you can find it. But try the turkey andouille, and I challenge you to tell me it's not just as good as regular andouille. So use every opportunity you can to cut out salt. So the sausage, like I was saying, already has a lot of salt in it, so you don't need to add any extra salt to your thing, because you know that the sausage has a ton of salt. There's nothing you can do about that. The second culprit is the stock. A lot of stocks just have so much salt in them. Even the low sodium brands I've looked have a lot of salt in them. And it's unfortunate that someone doesn't come out with a better low sodium brand, because as I've talked about before, salt has such a high correlation with your blood pressure. The more salt you have, the higher your blood pressure. If you're able to restrict your salt intake, patients are able to lower their blood pressure, in some cases, just as effectively as some of the blood pressure medicines. So salt intake is very important for your blood pressure. I know I've emphasized that already. So here's what I do to still get, because it's important to get that flavor that's inherent to a stock. It's really important for the gumbo, and anything that has a stock is its base. So I use half pre-made stock, and the other half you kind of make your own stock. So you can get gumbo crabs at the store. They're pretty cheap, like $1 for 3 of them. You throw those gumbo crabs in there. Take shrimp heads if you're using shrimp, which my recipe calls for shrimp. Take the heads, the skins, also the de-skinned turkey thighs. Throw them in the pot along with the half of the stock, and then an equivalent amount of water, so that half of it's stock and half of it's water. And you're boiling that all together, and you're kind of reinforcing the flavor and sort of making your own stock and still cutting the salt in half, if that makes sense. And the other thing is, if you can find a good low sodium brand, by all means use it. And this is one brand I found at Whole Foods. I looked at a bunch of different supermarkets for low sodium brands. I forget the different kinds, but Swanson's or whatever, they weren't too great. And so I found this one. It's a frozen fish stock that you can buy at Whole Foods in the freezer section. It works real well, and it's reasonably cheap. I want to say something like $2, which makes like 5 cups, we'll say, something like that. Maybe not quite as cheap as some of the other brands, but it's reasonable. Another thing you can do, a lot of the recipes will call for sauteing whatever meat you're using in oil. Well, instead of doing that, what you can do is bake it. You can still kind of get the crispy texture on the meat that you would have got from sauteing. And another thing that this allows you to do is deglaze the pan. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with this technique, or at least with the word. What you do is, after you're baking something, if you remove the meat from the pan, there'll be like a little crust of like, what it is, it's caramelized meat, sort of little meat pieces on the bottom. And so you add water to the hot pan, and you scrape off of the bottom, and what that adds is just a ton of flavor. That's just a big old mess of flavor sitting in there, and you can add that to your stock, and that'll really kind of round out the flavor and just kind of make it more flavorful. And what you're doing is adding flavor without salt and fat. Also, what you can do is you can saute vegetables with spices but without oil. I was skeptical of this myself, but